Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, January 7th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We're in the midst of a major winter storm in Israel, but we open in Paris, where just a few hours ago at least 12 people were killed, including 2 policemen and 10 wounded, in a shooting at the Paris offices of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo in France's deadliest terror attack in at least 2 decades. France Info Radio quoted a witness who viewed the incident from a nearby building, saying he saw 2 black hooded men entering the building carrying Kalashnikov rifles. A few minutes later, he heard shots, adding that he then saw the men flee the building, but not before they stopped to kill a wounded policeman. They apparently escaped in 2 vehicles. French President François Hollande headed to the scene of the attack as the government raised the security alert to its highest level. France was already on high alert after calls last year from Islamic terrorists to attack its citizens and interests in reprisal for French military strikes on Islamist strongholds in the Middle East and Africa. Hollande described the incident as definitely a terrorist attack. The same publication was firebombed 4 years ago after publishing caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, among other controversial sketches. Well, we are in the midst of a major winter storm with strong winds, rain, and snow forcing road and school closings across the nation. Just moments ago, reporter Ariel O'Sullivan was out braving the elements.
Yes, Laura, well, it's really coming down hard now, but it's rain and sleet, it's not snow. Now, earlier today, there was a dusting of the city with snow, but that's mostly washed away. Now, the IBA weather people promised us that more snow clouds are on the way, and it will be snowing in Jerusalem all night long. Earlier today, I took a stroll around the city to find out what was happening, the preparations, and on every major street corner, there were tractors and snowplows waiting with the drivers inside to clear away the snow once they got the orders. The main road to Jerusalem, Route 1 and 443, they were shut periodically during the day, and they probably will be shut in a few minutes again. But the trains will be running all the time. Here's the report I followed earlier.
Snow blanketing northern Israel. The blizzard has shut off Safed from the rest of the country and is closing roads across the Galilee and Golan Heights. Streets were largely empty of vehicles as folks stayed home. Classes were canceled, which meant that there was an opportunity for frolicking in the snow, making snowmen. This morning in the capital of Jerusalem, it was rain, sleet, and high winds, not snow, that greeted residents who have been bracing for the winter storm. Snow plows are ready and the tractors stationed at key junctions across the city, all ready to keep the streets clear.
You know, in New York, we deal with a few of these a year, so I think I can manage.
Are you surprised at the Israeli sort of panic over this whole thing?
You know, I heard in the news last year that there was a big problem last year, and as I've been telling my friends, cities usually try to not make the same mistakes with storms twice, so I think it's good that they're going extra protective to avoid what happened last year.
It's wild. I mean, I went to school in Colorado, so I grew up with this, but man, these Israelis are going crazy about this.
I brought all T-shirts. I have no long pants, nothing. I brought this in the shack. I'm not prepared for this.
They say Israelis weren't afraid of the rockets, but now there are a little bit of snow flurries and everybody's inside.
Yeah, it's wild. Everything's shutting down. They told us you can't go to Tel Aviv because you're not going to be able to get back.
It's chaos. I've never experienced cold weather in the Middle East. It just doesn't make any rational sense to me.
But you have a hat.
Yeah, I have a hat. I'm snug.
15 shekels he got this hat.
15 shekels.
Heavy rains are falling across central Israel and the Negev, and there is concern some rivers will flood. The wind was a major story, with gusts reaching up to 90 kilometers an hour. In Tel Aviv, it was knocking down people like paper cards. The wind also knocked down trees and light posts, causing power outages in various towns and neighborhoods, but the electric company was working at full capacity to keep the power on. The seas were recording up to 8-meter waves as it pounded the Mediterranean coast, and obviously keeping everyone off the beaches. At this hour, the anticipated snowstorm has arrived in the mountains covering Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, including Gush Etzion and Hebron. It's expected to peak this evening and be followed by rain. So the big question is, will the residents of Jerusalem wake up to a city covered in white or slush? Ariel O'Sullivan for IBA News.
We're joined now on the phone by Dr. Noah Wolfson, the Director of Meteotech Meteorological Services. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Good afternoon.
As I walked into the studio, I just noticed that the storm is really hitting Jerusalem. Is it not?
Yes, it does. On the radar, you can see a couple of 3 big waves making their way into the shores of Israel with very strong thunderstorms and very cold temperatures, and this would create very heavy snow in waves in Jerusalem and in the mountains. There might be some slight stoppages of the snow, but it would definitely go and go and go during the night.
As you mentioned, we just started seeing some accumulation. How much can we expect here in Jerusalem?
Well, we anticipate that the accumulation may reach any number between 10 and 20 centimeters. Due to the diverse topography of Jerusalem, the highest mountains will get more, like Har HaTzofim or Har Herzl, and maybe in the valleys a little bit less, but any number between 10 and 20. On top of it, you have to remember that there is the wind blowing, and therefore when you have barricades like cars or fences, the snow tends to accumulate. So it's a very low number, but on a flat terrain, we estimate 10 to 20 centimeters.
Dr. Wolfson, there's been extremely strong winds and large waves near the sea. What are the numbers and how unusual is it?
Okay, we've noted very strong waves in the Mediterranean, which have reached hours ago about 11 meters, which is huge, very huge waves. We have seen such things, but it's very huge, it's random. And the winds reached even more than the 90 kilometers mentioned. In some places we have measured, we have a network of stations, we have measured even 100 kilometers per hour. This is very unusual and very strong and create severe damages. Obviously, it's obstructive.
What do you expect will be the overnight situation? What will we wake up to in the morning?
I think in the wake up in the morning, you will wake up to white Jerusalem. The storm has not said its last word. It's progressing. It would continue through the night. And only on Thursday, which is only tomorrow, we will see some clearances. So it's Wednesday, we'll see some clearances, but it will be still cold. There might be rain, but the storm hasn't said its last word. The low system in the Mediterranean usually are more stagnant than in the United States. So when you do have a storm, it remains there for 3, 4, 5 days. It's not like migratory storms, which is Washington and New York for one day and there's a high, but it tends to stay, and therefore over the weekend and on Sunday we will see some renewal of rain. Renewal of rain and heavy rains, but not snow.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wolfson, the Director of the Mediotech Meteorological Services. Thanks so much, and keep us informed.
You're welcome. Bye.
In other news, Qassem Kawasme, the Hamas terrorist charged with the organizing and financing the abduction and murders of Israeli teenagers Eyal Yifrach, Gilad Sher, and Naftali Frankel in June last year, was sentenced to 3 life sentences yesterday by the Judea Military Court. IBA's Margot Dudkevich reports.
Qassem Kawasme, the mastermind behind the abduction and murders of 3 Israeli teenagers in June last year, was sentenced to 3 life sentences yesterday at the Judea Military Court. Eyal Yifrach, Gilad Sher and Naftali Frankel were abducted in Gush Etzion on June 12 while hitchhiking to their homes. Their disappearance sparked a huge manhunt that continued around the clock in the Hebron area and elsewhere in the West Bank until their bodies were found almost 3 weeks later, buried in a shallow grave in a field near Hebron. The Shin Bet at the time named the 2 terrorists who abducted the teenagers and perpetrated their murders as Marwan Kawasme and Amma Abu Aisha, who were killed by security forces during efforts to arrest them in Hebron in September, after they refused to surrender. The court also ordered Kawasme 40 to pay each of the boys' families the sum of 250,000 shekels in compensation for their murders. His sentencing came a week after he was convicted for planning, financing and organizing the teens' murders. He was arrested in August. The teenagers' murders shocked the entire nation. Tensions escalated after Israeli Arab teenager Muhammad al-Khadir was murdered in an apparent revenge attack. The events contributed to the start of the 50-day Operation Protective Edge. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
France warned the Palestinian Authority against escalating the diplomatic battle with Israel. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius reportedly warned PA President Mahmoud Abbas, who is insisting that the Palestinians will resubmit a resolution to the UN Security Council calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state. The composition of the Security Council changed with the start of the new year, and Abbas is hopeful that the members will pass the motion, which was defeated last week. France voted for the resolution, but not without reservations, and Paris is now concerned that a revisit of the bill will further antagonize Israel and harm chances for the renewal of peace talks. Fabius told reporters that while the Palestinians have a right to try to change the status quo, they should also be aware that there must be efforts to find a consensus solution, and he is afraid things will spiral out of control. The Palestinian Authority will join the International Criminal Court on April 1st. That's the word from UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who issued a statement confirming that documents from the so-called State of Palestine were received. The PA filed to become members of the ICC last week in a move that was firmly opposed by both Israel and the United States. The PA has declared its intent to file charges of war crimes against Israel in The Hague, and Israel is threatening countersuits. Police recommend prosecuting former defense minister and presidential candidate Benjamin Ben-Eliezer. A statement issued by police yesterday said sufficient evidence has been gathered against Ben-Eliezer and additional suspects. Ben-Eliezer is suspected of having received large sums of bribe money, money laundering, breach of trust, and tax offenses. Following the decision of Attorney General Yehuda Weinstein, the police anti-fraud squad, Lahav 433, began questioning Ben-Eliezer's and others believed to have been involved. His lawyers have rejected the police recommendations to prosecute, saying Ben-Eliezer served the state loyally over 5 decades, and a thorough look into the evidence will reveal a different picture. Last month, Ben-Eliezer resigned from the Knesset after serving in parliament for some 30 years. Valid Knesset member Hanin Zoabi does not have immunity from prosecution. That's a word from Attorney General Yehuda Weinstein, who informed the Arab lawmaker that she will likely be prosecuted for threatening Israeli Arabs who work for the Israeli security forces. Weinstein invited Zoabi to a pre-indictment hearing to enable her to dispute the charges based on her allegedly telling a crowd of protesters that Israeli Arabs who work for the enemy should be scared of us. The charges include disgracing a public servant and incitement for calling Arab police officers traitors and telling other Arabs to spit in their faces. Zoabi's attorney said that his client should not be charged for a spontaneous expression made in the heat of the moment. He accused Weinstein of bias, since in dozens of similar cases there was no indictment. In order to charge Zoabi, Weinstein would have first to take action to remove her immunity, and it appears that he is ready to do so. Turning to the election campaign, where the Prime Minister and his former finance minister take aim at each other over the housing issue, Netanyahu asked the public for advice on candidates to place on the Likud list, and at Tnuah MK Avram Mitzna calls Tzipi Livni a dictator. Here with more is Eli Wagalanter.
Why did the prices of homes start to rise? Because the Olmert government made an outrageous decision to stop building and planning in central Israel. That's what Prime Minister Netanyahu told Channel 2 News last night in a wide-ranging interview. Netanyahu said that he had started to take care of it 2 years ago, but had to stop because of Yair Lapid and his Yesh Atid party. Lapid shot back at Netanyahu today, accusing the premier of being disconnected from reality. In an interview with Israel Radio, the former finance minister said Netanyahu was panicking because he is weak and a failed prime minister who, during his 6 years in office, has led us to a dramatic rise in the cost of living, and housing prices have jumped more than 80%. Back to Netanyahu, who also declared that he did not promise Bayit Yehudi chairman Naftali Bennett the position of defense minister in the next government, denying recent rumors along those lines, and that he did not see evicting communities in Judea and Samaria as a realistic option at this time because there is no Palestinian partner for a peace agreement. Meanwhile, Netanyahu took an unconventional political step today, asking the Israeli public to recommend candidates for the Likud's 11th and 23rd spots, which are still vacant and which have been reserved for candidates of his choosing. He also posted it to his Facebook page and included an email address, newfaceslikud@gmail.com, for people to send in their suggestions. The innovative move will probably be hailed as brilliant and democratic by his supporters and scorned as a sign of desperation by his detractors. Turning to Hatnuah and party MK Amram Mitzna, who recently announced he would leave politics and not run in the upcoming elections, has criticized the head of his party, Tzipi Livni, over the unity agreement she reached with the Labour Party. Mitzna said that Livni made the decision to unite with Labour on her own without consulting the rest of the party. It was not my decision to leave, said Mitzna. 2 months ago, we were presented with the Hatnuah constitution, which did not exist before. We never authorized Livni to negotiate with other parties. Asked by the interviewer whether Livni was behaving like a dictator, Mitzner replied, in principle, yes. And speaking of dictators, Shas Chairman Aryeh Deri has apparently banned party officials from being interviewed on the popular Haredi radio station called Barama. A spokesman for Tzvika Cohn, a Shas member of the Jerusalem Municipal Council and a deputy mayor, told news anchor Mati Lavi that Cohn could not do an interview on his radio station about municipal preparations for the snowstorm because Deri had banned Shas officials from interviewing on Kol Barama. A Shas spokesman denied that there is a ban on the station. And, snowstorm or not, the elections news continues. That's it for today. Laura?
Thank you, Ellie. The U.S. plans to train moderate Syrian rebel groups to fight Islamic State operatives. A plan to start training in the spring has been secured, and a deal between Ankara, Washington, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia is expected to be concluded later this month to facilitate the rebels' training and equipment. Pentagon spokesman Rear Admiral John Kirby said the U.S. estimates there are several hundred ISIS fighters operating in Iraq and Syria. At present, he said U.S. military officials are in the process of identifying the rebel groups to be trained.
So no training has started yet. As you know, we've got 3 countries that have agreed to sponsor sites. Turkey, I just talked about that. Qatar and, of course, Saudi Arabia. And there's other regional partners that we're talking to as well about contributions that they might be able to make. So the effort continues, and we look forward to, in the new year, getting it up and going. I think if we continue to make the progress that we're making now, that we believe we could start conducting some training of moderate opposition by early spring. I cannot give you a more specific number of how many ISIL fighters. We just know it's hundreds, several hundred. It's not. I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, we don't have the ability to count every nose that we schwack. Number 2, that's not the goal. That's not the goal. The less of these guys that are out there, certainly that's the better. But the goal is to degrade and destroy their capabilities. And we're not getting into an issue of body counts.
Over 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon living in makeshift tent camps are unprepared to face the snowstorm and harsh winter conditions that have hit the country. Humanitarian agencies operating in Lebanon that host the largest number of Syrian refugees say that the camps offer little protection from the rain, wind, and snow. The dirt roads between the rows of tents have turned into a sea of mud. The roofs of the tents leak, and mattresses and other belongings are drenched. The conflict in Syria that erupted 3 years ago has left more than 7.2 million people uprooted. More than 3.3 million Syrian refugees went to Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. Due to the influx of those fleeing the conflict, Lebanon this week enforced new immigration border controls in an effort to stem the flow of people that continue to enter the country. I finally know what it feels like to be falsely accused of a serious crime. That comment from world-famous American Jewish attorney and pro-Israel advocate Alan Dershowitz, who has announced his intention to file defamation charges against lawyers Brad Edwards and Paul Castle, who represent a woman who accused Dershowitz of sexual abuse, along with Jewish financier Jeffrey Epstein and Britain's Duke of York, Prince Andrew. Since the allegations surfaced, Dershowitz claims that he has received hundreds of anti-Semitic email messages.
We file a sworn declaration categorically denying the charges and proving by records and other travel documents that I could not have been in the places that she said she had sex with me. We file a motion to intervene in the court. We then file a defamation action against the 2 lawyers and the woman, and then we file disbarment proceedings against the 2 lawyers. You can't imagine the joy the anti-Semites have. I'm getting emails every single hour from anti-Semites saying, see, we always knew the Jews ran the sex slavery business. We always knew that Jews in Israel are responsible for all the evils of the world. I have gotten more anti-Semitic, more anti-Israel mail because I represent not only myself, but I represent the values that I have stood for 50 years. And this is a direct attack on my values, which is why I have to defend it so vigorously. I will not stop until every reasonable person in the world knows not only that I am entirely innocent, but that Paul Cassell and Brad Edwards are guilty and pay a heavy price for their guilt. Oh, I've had many relationships with clients that have affected the way people feel about me. My defense of O.J. Simpson was not particularly popular. My defense of Klaus von Bülow was not popular. My defense of Mike Tyson was not popular. My defense of Leona Helmsley. Every one of these brought enmity to me, but none of them resulted in false accusations being leveled against me for sexual misconduct based on complete, wholly made-up stories. This is different. After 50 years, this is different. I now know what it feels like to be falsely accused of a serious crime.
Turning to the arts, and the Renana Municipal Music and Arts Center has produced 3 plays in English, and one will appear each month in January, February, and March. The first play is a one-man show called My First Sony, written by Benny Barbesh and based on his book by the same title. It's a story about the deterioration of an Israeli family told by Yotam, an 11-year-old child who records everything on his tape recorder. The show will appear this Thursday, January 8th. Next month's play will be Volunteer Man, and in March it's a production of The Timekeepers. For tickets, call 09-746-4036. That's the Renana Municipal Music and Arts Center, 09-746-4036. The Greek Orthodox Christmas Mass was held at midnight at the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem and continued on until the morning. Patriarch Theophilus III conducted the service after being greeted by marching bands at Manger Square. The Eastern Assyrian, Greek Orthodox, Armenian, and Coptic churches all celebrate Christmas on January 7th because they follow the Julian calendar, while the Catholics follow the Gregorian calendar and celebrate Christmas on December 25th. Turning to local finance, and the shekel strengthened in foreign currency trading, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were mixed. Here's a look at the late afternoon numbers. And as we've heard throughout the broadcast, the winter weather is expected to continue. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours at home and abroad. And that's all for this newscast. Aaron Viner will be here tomorrow at the same time. Until then, have a good evening. Stay warm, stay dry. Shalom from Jerusalem.